Straight Shift with the Car Chick, the podcast that's all about cars, buying, selling, fixing, and driving, and sometimes running fast if you're the car chick. Now, here she is.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Straight Shift. I know I promised you guys that I would do a 3-part series all about electrified cars. And the first one I published earlier this month, talking about the different technologies behind hybrids, plug-in hybrids, and fully electric vehicles. And part 2 will be about the realities of owning one of these vehicles and maintaining them, and just what does that reality look like currently in the United States. But that is not this podcast. I was doing a Twitter Spaces chat yesterday with Scotty Reese, who is the owner and editor of the phenomenal website, A Girl's Guide to Cars. And we were talking about how some of the manufacturers, because of the chip shortage, are removing options and features from cars in order to be able to spit out more cars using fewer computer chips. And it was a great discussion. If you're not familiar with Twitter Spaces, it is Twitter's live functionality, but it's audio only, thank goodness. So I didn't have to get fancy. I could still do it in my yoga pants. But it's a good opportunity for us to talk and get some information out live to the audience. And if you haven't checked out A Girl's Guide to Cars.com, definitely do so. It is a phenomenal website. Scotty and her team do a great job of getting hardcore car information and car products, anything related to owning, buying, selling, and maintaining your car. And it's, yes, it is by women for women, but guys, I promise the information applies to you as well. And it's great info, very straightforward, doesn't have the editorializing and opinions that a lot of sites do. So she's just really big on facts, and it's a great, great website. And I have done some writing for her, although I prefer to talk rather than write. So this is why she has drafted me to do some of these live events on social media. And we do record them now, and they are saved on her website. But I thought this information was really important to get out to my audience for the Straight Shift. So I am inserting this podcast in between talking about electrified cars. So I promise the next podcast will be that part 2 on electrified cars. But I think this is very timely information for anyone who is shopping for a new car right now, that you need to be aware that it may not have all of the bells and whistles that you are expecting it to have, that it is advertised to have on the manufacturer's website or on Edmunds or wherever you're doing your research to try and figure out which trim level contains the heated seats and the sunroof and the navigation, or whichever bells and whistles you're looking for. Because unfortunately, the automakers are having to make some very tough decisions right now about how can we get the most cars to market that have the features that are most important to our best target audience, given that we have a fraction of the computer chips that we actually need to produce cars. Some manufacturers seem to be having a little bit more trouble with this than others. I have seen some of the German manufacturers and certainly the American manufacturers be hit a little bit harder. And as I have talked in previous podcasts, a lot of that is due to whatever supplier relationships they have for the computer chips. Ford and GM, I have said, are building their own computer chip plants because they realize they cannot be dependent on external suppliers, knowing that the demand for computer chips is not going to go down. It is only going to continue to rise exponentially, and there will continue to be massive competition for those computer chips across all markets. Really, if you stop and think, how much stuff, how many of the products that we buy here in the United States now contains computer chips. It's like everything we buy now has to be smart. So I knew that they were putting a lot of functionality that required computer chips into things like your washer and dryer, your dishwasher, the refrigerator, so that these appliances would be smart appliances and could have functionality that would make our lives easier. So your fridge can now tell you if you're out of milk. You don't actually have to bother to open the door and look, apparently. You can program your washer and dryer to kick on remotely. You don't even have to be there. I mean, there's just crazy functionality that when you really step back and think about it, these are all so first world problems. It just made me realize how spoiled, I'm just going to say it, spoiled we are in America, that we have these things. So in some ways, the lack of car inventory because there's not enough computer chips, we've kind of brought this on ourselves by demanding things like refrigerators and dishwashers that have more functionality. I mean, yes, of course, the computer chip problem has definitely been affected by the increased demand for things like laptops and tablets and phones and things that we have needed to stay connected while we are riding out this pandemic. But to not be able to get a refrigerator because they can't build as many of those because they need computer chips. I mean, honestly, my refrigerator does not need a computer chip. Now, if it had something that would clean out the fridge for me, that would be fantastic. But they haven't invented that yet, as far as I know. I was speaking with a prospective client the end of last week, and she is an interior designer. And we were just kind of chatting about this whole situation. I actually told her not to buy a new car, that she should buy out the lease on the one that she has. That was the best decision for her. But we just started talking because I was asking her some questions about furniture, because interior design is my other passion. And she was telling me that even furniture has computer chips. Apparently, you can buy couches that are recliner couches, and they have a wireless charging device built into the arms. So, heaven forbid, should you have to plug your cell phone in, you can just set your phone on the arm of the couch and it will charge itself while you're watching TV. And some of them are even Alexa enabled, so that you can say, Alexa, raise my feet, and the couch will recline for you. So, God forbid, should you actually have to push a button or push on the arm of the couch, you can simply ask Alexa to do it for you. I mean, that just boggles my mind that we've gotten that spoiled and that sophisticated with the technology. I mean, it's cool that it exists and you can do those things, but do we really need that right now? I mean, honestly, I'd really rather they be able to build more cars. But anyway, I'm kind of going off on a tangent with that, but all of that just kind of put it all in perspective for me and made me realize that we really are going to be in this for a while longer, because it does take a long time to ramp up that computer chip production. And it's not just about catching up from what we've lost in production from the pandemic. It is truly because the demand for computer chips, for all of these intelligent devices and furniture and everything that we have decided we need in our lives, it's just going to continue to go up exponentially. And so I think we were going to start seeing some tightening of that market anyway, because the demand will always shoot up faster than they can increase the supply of these things. So how is this affecting the car manufacturers? Some of them are seriously skimping on options in order to produce more cars. And I use the word skimping and it sounds very negative and it is annoying, but I certainly understand that they are having to make some very difficult choices. So I wanted to give you guys some examples of some of the bells and whistles that you might think you're going to get with a new car, but maybe you won't. So you need to really check these things for the specific car you're looking to buy to make sure that it actually has it. So, for example, and I will give you examples, but this list is certainly not exhaustive and it changes from month to month. So, you need to really look at the car you're buying and ask the right questions to find out if it's going to be missing any options that you were expecting it to have. So, for example, BMW in many cases for some of their cars. And this is not true across their entire lineup. The manufacturers, again, they are scalping parts from one car to make sure they have enough of those parts for their more popular models. So they might be pulling things out of their sedans that are not as hot selling so that they can put them into their SUVs, which are more popular. So it really is going to depend on the exact make and model and even trim level of the car that you are buying. So, for example, touchscreens are one of the things that BMW has decided they can live without, because you still have that track pad that they call the iDrive controller to interface with the car. The voice commands are also there in many cases. So you have some alternatives. You can still communicate with the car. You still have a user interface. So the touch screen, they've decided, I guess, people are used to using our trackpad. We've had that for years. They can live without the touchscreen for now, and that will save us X number of computer chips that we can then use to make more cars. Now, if you also ordered a BMW that had the touchscreen and it also had the backup assist technology package, which is their automated parking, the car parks for you, you will probably not have that as well. It's really cool and really convenient to have the car park for you, because God forbid we should learn to parallel park. They just don't have that on the driving test anymore, apparently. But it's something that, honestly, first world problem, we can live without for a while until we can get the computer chips back. It's better than them pulling out some of the safety technology or something more important than the car parking itself. The touch screens are really nice, but again, there is an alternative interface that they've had for years that, while some of us find it annoying and kludgy, it does work. So we can live without the touchscreen technology. Cadillac, for example, has decided not to include what they call Super Cruise technology. That's their version of, like, Tesla has the autopilot. It's kind of the pseudo self-driving feature on the Escalade. So Escalade drivers, I am so sorry, but you're probably going to have to drive the car yourself for a little while, because Cadillac is not implementing Super Cruise, because that takes a lot of computer chips. But sometimes it's not just these fancy features. Some of the manufacturers are having to, especially GM. Poor GM has had a lot of problems. So no surprise that they're going to build their own plant, because GM and Ford have really been hurting, as has Chrysler. GM has had to delete things as simple as the HD radios on some of their vehicles. They've even pulled out things like heated and cooled seats and the heated steering wheels in some of their SUVs and their pickup trucks. And we might think, okay, those are things we can live without. But as anyone who lives north of the Mason-Dixon line or in any cold, wintry state, you can be like, what do you mean I can't have my heated seats and my heated steering wheel? Those things have started to become a little more of a necessity for folks in the colder climates. Or down here in the South, while cooled seats are still kind of a luxury feature, for the people that have them when you live in the Carolinas or Georgia or Texas or Florida, it gets dang hot in the summer. Those cooled seats are pretty darn nice. So if you have a GM product, you're looking to buy a GM SUV or truck, you might want to look at those to see if they have those. I was looking at a Buick Enclave. We actually bought one the end of last year for one of my clients, and we thought that the trim level we were looking at was supposed to have heated rear seats. Now, arguably in Charlotte, do you really need that? But it was a feature that was very important to her because her daughter is a dancer, and so she's super skinny and has no body fat. And so she gets really cold, and the heated seats were really important to her. And we thought that this model was supposed to have it, and it was supposed to have it. Didn't have them because they had deleted the rear heated seats in order to save on a computer chip. So we had to shift to a different car, to a different trim level of that car to get the heated seats. And it wasn't that it was a blanket delete. It was, okay, the ones that were produced in this time frame, we had to delete them. But if you could find that was made before that date, they might still have them. So again, it's not an easy thing to figure out. You really have to look at the window sticker for the exact car you are looking to buy. which again is difficult because you may not have that window sticker yet, because you may be having to put a deposit down on a car that is still at the factory, or it's not even been built yet. You are waiting for it to be built, and so there is no window sticker, and you don't actually know how they're going to build it. So this is just making another level of complexity to trying to just buy a car. It's getting harder and harder to do that and to make the right decisions because there are so many more variables and uncertainties given the current climate. So watch out for that. Personally, I don't think you should have to give up heated seats, but this can happen. Another thing that a lot of GM cars are giving up is the wireless charging for your cell phone. Now, you'll still have the ability to plug it in using an old-fashioned cable. I can't believe I'm saying a cable for your cell phone is old-fashioned, but they're giving up the wireless charging because, again, there's another way to give you the same functionality to charge your phone in the car. It just doesn't happen to be wireless. In my world, that makes absolutely no difference, but for some people, that's important. So again, take a look. I'm going to take a real quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some other features that may be important to you that your car might not have, along with how some of the manufacturers are sacrificing customers in other countries in order for us Americans to have the things that we want. I'll be right back after this. Do you hate car shopping? Do you worry about being taken advantage of or about finding the right car at a great price? Buying a car can be a frustrating and time-consuming experience. But what if you could get a great deal without having to do a ton of research, without having to haggle, and without the fear of buying a lemon? You can. As your personal car shopper, the Car Chick will help you pick the perfect car based on your unique lifestyle, budget, and personality. She'll handle all of the legwork and negotiating for you. All you have to do is sign the papers and take the keys. It's that easy. To learn how the Car Chick can save you time, money, and hassle on your next car purchase, give us a call at 704-248-8706. That's 704-248-8706. Or visit us on the web at thecarchick.com.
Automatic? We don't need no stinking automatic.
Straight Shift with the Car Chick.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Straight Shift. Today we are talking about the automakers having to, in some cases, skimp on the bells and whistles that you might be expecting should come with your new car, but they're having to leave those out due to the lack of computer chips. And they're having to make some pretty tough decisions on how to allocate their meager resources. It's like a hospital having too many patients to treat and not having enough resources. And they have to make some tough decisions on how to allocate the resources in the most critical places. And that's exactly what the automakers are doing. It's a triage situation. We are mostly seeing it with the American manufacturers and a little bit with the German manufacturers. I have not yet seen this, and it doesn't mean it's not happening. It just means that I have not seen it in the shopping that I have been doing. I have not seen it with most of the Japanese and Korean manufacturers. Nissan is an exception. I have seen in some cases they have made the decision to not implement the built-in navigation system in some of their makes and models, and instead allow you to rely on the Apple CarPlay Android Auto functionality and use just the navigation app that's on your phone. They decided that that was something they could sacrifice because more and more people are preferring to use the navigation on their phone through the CarPlay or Android Auto anyway, because half the time it's more accurate and often better functionality. So they made that decision because, again, there's an alternative, and an alternative that most people prefer anyway. So it's not the end of the world if there's not a built-in navigation system. And we're kind of seeing built-in nav systems are probably going to phase out of the industry anyway because of the smartphone integration. But it's not just the computer chips. Nissan also had to stop putting the spray-in bed liner in their trucks for a while. It's now back, but there were a few months where that supply chain of the spray-in bed liner product was not available to them. And so instead of just not producing the trucks, they said, you know what? People can live without a spray-in bed liner. We're going to keep producing the trucks, and that feature is just not going to be offered for a little while. Fortunately, that's back, but that is a sign of the disruption to the overall supply chain. It's not just computer chips. Fortunately, these other disruptions are temporarily, and we will see them come back if they have not already. But again, when you are shopping for a new car, don't be surprised if there are some things that aren't available. Even some accessories you might not be able to get because they're back ordered. Tow hitches have been back ordered in many cases and are hard to get because the demand for tow hitches has just gone up so much in the last year and a half because people not being able to take their normal vacations are like, hey, you know what? We're going to buy a boat. We're going to buy some jet skis. We're going to buy a camper. And so they've needed to add a tow hitch to their existing vehicle so that they can go off and do these adventures that are a little more feasible to do during a pandemic. So the demand for tow hitches went through the roof. But again, we're going to see those types of things settle back down, whereas the computer chip problem is a longer term problem, and we're going to be dealing with it for a while. Even the luxury brands are dealing with this. And if you think about it, that makes sense because the fancier the car, typically the more swanky bells and whistles it has, and swanky bells and whistles these days translates into need for computer chips. But some of them, are things that you're really going to notice. I mean, even Tesla has had to make some of these decisions, and in a few of their cars, they've had to reduce the number of USB ports because, before they had like 20 USB ports in their cars. I'm exaggerating, but there were a ton. So they've had to pare that down. Heaven forbid, you might only get 1 or 2 USB ports in the car. But they also sacrificed the power lumbar in some of their passenger seats. So that's something that, if the seat comfort is important to you, particularly if you have back issues, you need to be sure that the vehicle you're looking at really does come with that power lumbar support and adjustments that you are expecting it to have and that you need it to have for your physical comfort and safety. So that's definitely something to check. Speaking of seat adjustments, I did have to laugh. Porsche has had to scale back on their 18-way power adjustable driver's seat on some of their models because it takes too many computer chips. I mean, I can't even think of 18 different ways that you could possibly adjust a seat in the first place. So that one kind of made me chuckle. Definitely a first world problem. But in a luxury brand, you expect this ridiculous level of bells and whistles for the ridiculous amount of money that you're paying. But it did make me kind of laugh. But little things like the start-stop functionality that has been so, GM has put in so many of their vehicles. And what that is when you get to a traffic light, it shuts off the engine and kind of puts it in a standby mode. And when you put your foot on the gas, when the light turns green, then it quickly restarts everything. Quickly being a relevant term. In some of their models, they have deleted that technology, which to anyone who has actually had to live with that start-stop technology, that would be a blessing because I can't tell you how many people hate that start-stop technology because there is such a delay and it puts a lot more wear and tear on your starter. So GM, if you're listening, just go ahead and delete that start-stop stuff like permanently. Drives everybody crazy anyway, which is why you've had to implement a turn off switch for that people can elect to turn it off because they hate it so much. So if you want to save on computer chips, that's a great area to do it. Not that anybody from GN corporate is listening to me, but that would be great. So I'm not worried about that one. The good news is they are not deleting things like blind spot monitoring. Obviously they're not going to delete backup cameras. Those are required by law for SUVs and trucks nowadays. They're not going to skimp on your safety, but they may skimp on your comfort and your convenience in order to produce more cars. But here's another thing that some of the manufacturers are doing, because remember, this is a global problem. This is not just something that's affecting us here in the United States. It's affecting us more because we are more spoiled and we are used to having more of these luxury features in our cars. We don't even think of things like heated seats and navigation as being a luxury feature anymore. We consider that to be, hey, that's a necessity. But other areas of the world are not quite as privileged as we are. And so those are more luxury features to them. So, what a few of the manufacturers have been doing is sacrificing those bells and whistles in the vehicles they are producing for other countries in order to allocate more of their computer chip supply to give those features to vehicles that are being sold here in the United States, because we just won't give up our bells and whistles as easily as a lot of other countries. But if you think about it, okay, do you really need heated seats in a country like India, which tends to be a warm country? I'm sure there are places where it gets cold and you would need heated seats, but they're sacrificing some of those things. They've been sacrificing some of those features like the built-in navigation in cars that are sold in Europe. And Europe has easier navigation than we do. They have better signs. People use more transportation. It's not as big of a place as the United States. And we rely on navigation systems a lot more than the folks over in Europe. So that is an area where they've said, the Europeans are going to be okay living without this, so let's allocate it to the American market. So part of that is profitability driven. It's about being able to get the vehicles that sell the best for the most money to the market that will buy them. And these are features that are important to them. So it's really happening truly on a global scale. And it makes me feel a little bit guilty that we're almost like stealing parts from other countries to satisfy our need for these bells and whistles. I think really looking at this information and thinking about it just was a little bit of a humbling experience for me and made me much more grateful and appreciative of the things that we do have, the privileges, the luxuries that we have in the United States that the rest of the world doesn't have. It reminds me of when I was traveling a lot. I was very fortunate to be able to travel a lot growing up with my parents. And we did notice that there were a lot of things that were very different than they were at home. And my parents prepared me for that and educated me on that so that when we went to visit other countries, we didn't get that reputation of being the ugly American tourist. We were very courteous and grateful to be able to travel. So little things like refrigeration, like we take for granted. You go to a restaurant and you order a soda, even a fast food place, and you get ice in your soda or ice in your water. Ice in other countries back then, and I'm dating myself here, but ice is not a guaranteed thing. It wasn't. And so you would go to Europe, refrigeration was very expensive. And so to get ice in your drink was a luxury in many places. You had to specifically ask for it. In some cases, you actually had to pay extra for it. So I learned at an early age that the lifestyle that we live in America is very different from the rest of the world. And it is, definitely a more luxurious standard of living. So, I think having not traveled as much as I've gotten older and not seen those differences for myself, I kind of forgot. And learning this information about having to reallocate bells and whistles in the car world just made me really reappreciate that. So I hope you all will take a moment and digest that information and take a moment to be grateful for what we do have in this country. We really are so fortunate to have what we do. And the next time you go to complain that it's hard to get a product that you want, stop and think, in the grand scheme of things, it probably really is a first world problem. And you're still lucky that you have the option of even getting a product like that to begin with. So, a little bit of a soapbox, folks, but this is just something that I really started thinking about. But to take this back to what does this mean for you with buying cars? You have to find out exactly what features are actually going to be coming on the car that you are buying. Now, I have not seen Toyota or Hyundai or Kia or Honda so far, those manufacturers, I have not seen them skimping on anything. I haven't seen Lexus skimping on anything. That doesn't mean that it might not happen, and you should still absolutely do your diligence to make sure you know if they are going to be deleting any features from your car that you were expecting it to have. And the challenge with that, as I said, is in most cases these days, when you're buying a new car, that new car is not sitting on the dealer lot. It is somewhere in the production pipeline, or it has not yet entered the production pipeline. You have put a deposit down on a theoretical future vehicle, and you don't know how the manufacturer is actually going to build that car. You have asked them, pretty please build it this way for me, but that's no guarantee that's what they're actually going to do. And in some cases, for the cars that you do place a true order for, they will, based on the options that you have wanted, if you want more bells and whistles, you may have to wait longer to get that car because they're going to prioritize the orders that require less computer chips, that have less bells and whistles requested. And so you may be waiting a little bit longer than your neighbor who ordered the same car, but without as many packages on it. So be aware of that. But talk with your dealer, or if you're working with me, I will certainly be doing all of this for you to find out, is the manufacturer skimping on options? Or if we order this trim level, it will have all those options, but we're probably going to have to wait a few months to get it. Ask those questions. And then the moment a build sheet or a window sticker is available for the car that you have put a deposit on, review that and see what's actually on there. I just got a Palisade that hit the ground that we had ordered a couple of months ago, and I finally got the window sticker today because it just arrived at the dealership, and it did not have the tow hitch and the rubber mats that we wanted. But that's not a big deal. Those are things that the dealer can add. We may have to wait a little bit to get the tow hitch depending on how that's back ordered. But then it also had several accessories that they put on the factory that we didn't request and that we really didn't want, but they're actually not bad things to have. But it did increase the price of the car by about $500 that we weren't expecting, but it is what it is. And the accessories they added, like the cargo cover and the seat back protectors and the cross rails for the roof, these are things that they can add to the car to eke out a little bit more profit that doesn't require computer chips. So don't be surprised if the car you ordered has a bunch of accessories on it from the factory that you didn't order, that you didn't request, and that you may not want, but that you're probably stuck with because they did put them on at the factory or installed them at the port, in which case they're still a part of the original MSRP of that car. But hopefully it's useful things like seat back protectors and the cargo tray and the cross rails for the roof rack. I'm glad that we got those. So again, you're just going to have to do more diligence to make sure that you're getting the accessories, the features, the options that you really need to have. And you may have to have a heart-to-heart conversation with yourself about, what do I really absolutely positively must have for this vehicle to support my lifestyle and my body and what I really need, and what, I'd love to have this. It's going to bum me out if I don't have it, but it's more important to actually get the car. I can live without it, and make those decisions for yourself. So have that heart to heart with yourself. Really think about that, and don't just assume that you're going to be able to get every bell and whistle of your heart's desire due to the challenges in the current market. All right, well, thanks so much for listening to me be on my soapbox a little bit today, but I thought this was an important topic since people are actively car shopping, and you need to know what you're actually getting for the money that you're paying, especially since you're probably paying a little bit more than you'd ideally like to in this market. Next podcast, I promise, will be part 2 of the electrified cars and what it is really like to own one of these things and things you need to consider before you buy one. So until then, folks, drive safely. I'm out of here.
The Straight Shift podcast is copyright LeeAnn Shattuck, the Car Chick, 2017. All views expressed by guest and or co-hosts are those of the guest and or co-hosts, and not necessarily those of LeeAnn Shattuck or the Car Chick.